Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, guys. How's your life during your self-quarantine at home? I hope you guys are fine and don't forget to stay healthy. Okay, we are from group 2. We are going to explain about Pidgins and Creoles. So me, as a first presenter, Allifna Nurizzati F, and I'm going to explain about the definition of lingua franca and the definition of Pidgin and Creoles. So before we go to the definition, I would like to give you an illustration first. So here's the illustration. This is a circumstance happened in Changi Airport, where there's a flight from Singapore Airlines. Here there are two persons from different nations. These persons try to communicate with each other. This person tried to ask this person, "Vilka är eran?" And this person answered, "Command cover." They realized that they cannot communicate with their own language, so this person tried to ask again, "Can you speak English?" And he answered, "Oh yeah, I can." Finally, they could communicate together with English language. Okay, after we take a look to the illustration, we can take the definition that lingua franca is people who speak different language who are forced into contact with each other must find some way of communicating, or a lingua franca. In publication concerned with the use of vernacular language in education published in Paris in 1953, UNESCO defined a lingua franca as a language which is habitually by people whose mother tongue are different, in order to facilitate communicating between them. Okay, what is Pidgins and what is Creoles? Pidgins is the word pidgins refers to a language used as a means of communication between people who do not share a common language. It happened in colonial time, which they are forced to communicate each other, but they do not have a lingua franca. That's why Pidgins has no native language. So they made a new language to communicate each other. The word pidgin derived from a mispronunciation of the English word business. The term pidgin English was first applied to the commercial lingua franca used in southern China and Melanesia. But now pidgins is a generic term that refers to any simplified language that has derived from the two or more parent language. And then when a pidgins develop into a more complex language and becomes the first language of a community, it is called Creole. So Creole took from Pidgins. Pidgins has no native language, but Creole has native language, which is Pidgins. So when Pidgins develop and then deliver to the children, deliver to their neighbors, and it's developed and become a more complex language, it is called Creole. Creoles typically arise as the result of contact between the language of a dominant group and that of a subordinate group, as happened as the result of Europe.
Okay, let's start about the characteristics of Pidgin. The first is Pidgin have non-native speakers, of course, because Pidgin language comes directly. The second is arise quickly for functional communication, for example, for trade or for labor. And the third is compromise between two or more language. So, for example, there are two people from different country and have different language. When they communicate, in order to understand each other, they create a pidgin language. Next is the distribution of pidgins. Pidgins are usually arise when one group of people is dominant over another groups of people, and the less dominant group needs to communicate with the more dominant group. For example, in the past, Netherlands come to Indonesia to colonize Indonesia because Netherlands is a dominant group, so Indonesia must imitate their language. So the Indonesia adopt a short simplified language such as They simplify the vocabulary from Netherlands and simplify the grammar or native language so they can communicate each other. And next is characteristic and distribution of Creole. The first characteristic is usually start as a pidgin, and Creole becomes children's native language. For example, slaves from several different countries are working closely together on a plantation here. But they have no common language, so they develop their pidgin and it quickly becomes their expanded pidgin, the language they use for all everyday purposes. So it will be a habit, and when they have a children, the children imitate them, imitate their language. So it happens to the next generation. The last is the example. Another example. This example from Bislama is one of a country or a city which is an English-based Creole spoken in Vanuatu. So we have one sentence here. This is my house. In Bislama, him ya house belong me. Or in more standard English phonology, him here house belong me. So this sentence have the same meaning, right? This is about this house is mine. Yeah, like something like that. So that's all about the characteristic and distribution of Pidgin and Creoles.
Okay, so the speaker here is Alfie Nurul S, and now I'm going to talk about the origins. But the origin here is not the origin or the history of Pidgins and Creoles, but it is more focused on the origin of similarities of Pidgins and Creoles. I will explain 4 theories about it, and here is the first theory. The theory is called polygenesis. So polygenesis have a variety of origins. Maybe some of you know that poly means more than one, so yeah, they have a variety. And the similarities among them arise from the second circumstance of their origins. Now, for example, you can look at this. What I understand from the sources from the book, that maybe this trading circumstance is the circumstance that being shared in this explanation. So maybe back like 100 years ago, here is the English speaker and here is the non-English speaker. So they are doing business, and in order to understand each other and to do their own business, this English speaker will use simplified English so that this non-English speaker will understand what they are going to talk about. Maybe if you're wondering why not, for example, he is an Indonesian, why not this Indonesian speaker using simplified Indonesian? It doesn't happen because in every case the target language is English. So the simplified English, it developed in a number of places, giving rise to varieties. So the development of this language creates similarities among Pidgin and Creoles. The next theory is monogenetic. According to McWhorter, their similarities can be accounted for if we look back to the beginnings of the slave trade. So this is the West African coast. This is the English slave port and this is the French slave port. The people here speak English and the people here speak French. And I think this man as a representative of the native African. And on the book it is stated that they speak West African Pidgins Portuguese. So since in this course there are a lot of contact language, English, French, African, and African Pidgin Portuguese. This contact language later developed across the Atlantic, and they create dissimilarities among Atlantic Pidgin and Creoles. So why this is called monogenetic, which means once, because the most important role here is from this point of view. The next theory, or the third theory, is called relaxification. European language-based Pidgins and Creoles derive from a single source. That was Saber language, a lingua franca used in the Mediterranean in the Middle Ages. And in the 15th until 16th centuries, Portuguese relaxified this language. So, in order to make you more understand about this, relaxified also means change. So, in the centuries, Portuguese changed this language, this Saber language, and then it creates the Portuguese-based Pidgins, and that this language spreads as the usage as a trade language, and later this Portuguese-based Pidgin was in turn relaxified into Pidginized French, English, and Spain. So, according to this theory, the similarities of Pidgins and Creole creates by relaxification or change. If you're wondering about the example of relaxification theories, you can take a look at the PDF, page 76. So here's the concrete example of Portuguese and Sabir language. Then move to the last theory. This is called language bioprogram hypothesis by Bickerton. So actually, by Bickerton against the relaxification theory, and he offered this theory, which he thinks this is more relevant. So according to this theory, Creoles are developed by multilingual environment children. For example, Englishmen married with French women, and the way how they communicate with other or with peer contact is by using the Pidgin language. The story said that Pidgination is the second language learning and Creolization is the first language learning. Maybe you already know this from the characteristics which said that Creoles become children's native language, meanwhile Pidginization compromise between two or more language. The story also said that children use this bioprogram the same way wherever they happen to be, and the consequence is that the grammatical structure of Creoles are more similar to one another than they are to the structure of any other language. So it can be concluded that language bioprogram hypothesis believe that children play an important role in how language changes. So the similarities of Pidgin and Creoles also is affected by the children. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, right now I'm Amran Busron. I'm going to deliver the material from Pidgin to a Creole. Okay, before we take a look further into an example of from Pidgin to a Creole, I remind you that a Creole is the native language of some of its speakers. And then Creolization. This form when from a Pidgin to a Creole, this form of Creolization. Creolization occurs only when a Pidgin for some reason becomes the variety of language that children must use in situations in which use of a full language is effectively denied them. Now, let's take a look to its example. I took a Guyanese English as an example from Pidgin to a Creole. So, in Guyanese English, in its usage, it is divided into social stratification. Let's take a look here. He used the term acrolate to refer to educate Guyanese English, a variety which really has very few differences from other varieties of standard English. While he used the term basilic to refer to a variety at the other extreme of the continuum, the variety that would be least comprehensible to a speaker of the standard, perhaps even incomprehensible. And then the last is mesolects. Mesolects are intermediate varieties. However, these are not discrete entities. For one important characteristic of these intermediate mesolects is that they blend into one another to fill the space between the acroletic and the basilic. As I said just now that, as we might expect, there is considerable social stratification involved in such a situation. Bickerton acts close up to show how the following Guyanese varieties of the standard English sentence "I told him" may be pronounced in the various parts of the continuum. As you can see, the first is "I told him." Second, "I told him." 3, "I told him." 4th, "I tell him." 5th, "I tell him." 6th, "I tell him." 7, "I tell him." 8, "Me tell him." 9, "Me tell him." I actually don't know how to pronounce that well. I'm not really well to pronounce them. So we can know here the first three varieties 1 to 3 exemplify middle class usage and are typical acrolate forms. And the next 4 are mesolect forms found in the lower middle and urban working classes. Item 8 is found in the rural working class, and item 9 is used by old and illiterate rural laborers. These are typical basilic forms. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.